Welcome to Coffee with Linda. I'm Linda, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to share some of my story with you because I know that all of you have stories, and I know that our stories happen to us for a reason. And I know that when I tell my story, people are inspired and encouraged. And that's what I want for you, because I want you to find God's power within your life with your perseverance through anything that you might go through. So the first time, I'd like to talk about miracles first. And the first time I ever witnessed a miracle, I was 12 years old, and I was taking care of my grandparents' parakeet. They had gone to Texas, I believe. And I cleaned his cage a Saturday morning, gave him fresh water, fresh food. Sunday morning, he was dead in the bottom of the cage. Sunday afternoon, I became desperately sick, very, very sick. And by Monday, had gone into a coma and was rushed to our local hospital. And they didn't give my parents much hope. They put me in isolation, and my mother stayed with me in a cap and gown, and my uncle would come every day after work, and he would stand outside the door, and I remember him. And please know this, people in comas know things. I knew things. You just can't respond to them. We had a little bakery behind the hospital, and I remember early, every morning before it was sunlight, I remember the donuts raising, and you wonder why I love morning time with donuts and coffee. I remember the doctor coming in and putting needles in my feet and not responding. I would watch the needle go in, but felt nothing. And so every day after work, my Uncle Paul would come, and he'd stand outside the door, and he would say, "How you doing today, Lenny?" And he'd say, "You're going to be okay." And every day he'd come, and then one Wednesday he came, and he said, "You're going to be okay because tonight our church is going to pray all night, and you're going to be okay." And Thursday morning, I came out of the coma. And Thursday afternoon, my Uncle Paul came on his regular time, and I was sitting up in bed. And he cried, and my mama cried. And so that was the first time that our family had seen a true miracle. And I was in bed for like 3 months after that. They didn't want me to go to school that fall, but I just wanted to go to so badly. So our little family doctor said, "Okay, I'll make a deal with you. You come every Friday night after school, and I'll see how you're doing. I'll check you out, and let's just play it by ear." So it came time for grade card time, and he said, "How did you do this time?" I said, "I was on the honor roll." And each time I was on the honor roll, and he just couldn't believe it, because at one point they said that I could be a vegetable for the rest of my life. So that was our first miracle that we actually saw, and I'm so grateful for that. So as I was reading my journal of a time that I went through back in 2004, I talked to the sponsor here, and I said, "What do you think about me reading part of my journal?" And they thought it was a great idea. So I'm going to read to you a couple episodes that I have in my journal, and I hope that it touches your heart as much as I've seen audiences touched by it, because I want you to know when we finish with these episodes that beyond a shadow of a doubt, there is a great creator out there who loves you so very, very much, knows every detail about you, knows every hair on your head. And so that's the point of all of our Coffee with Lindas. So let me start here. I'll get my glasses first. That would be good. All right. Now, just a little backdrop before we start this is I'm starting it at 2004. And that's when some pretty amazing things happened to me. And in 2002, I actually lost my son, Scotty. He was killed by a drunk driver. And so my life started changing dramatically then, really suddenly. And so this is about 2004 then, when I'm going to start this. I knew it the minute I smelled it and heard the crashing waves of the Gulf of Mexico. The air was thick with plant life, sea oats, salt water, and the moon was as bright as I had ever seen. I had just driven across the Channel 4 bridge and had stopped my car to step onto the beach. Except it wasn't much of a beach, as little critters began to climb up my corporate black silk pantsuit, and thistles snatched their prickly fingers around the fibers of my clothing. But still, I was instantly hooked on life in the west coast of Florida, the little Gulf Coast island of Cedar Key. I didn't have an inkling of how it was going to change my life forever. I wanted to live there always, first, not just because of this salty way of life, but the salty people with lifelong stories, fresh food from the ocean, clams being birthed into raceways, and the music of backwoods and musicians. To this day, upon arriving at the Channel 4 bridge, there is something magical in the air that causes my heart to tingle. Little did I know that I would also soon be introduced to life on a beautiful East Coast island, where I would reside for the rest of my life. Beautiful St. Augustine, the oldest city of America. It's a town where art and music cohesively mesh, with beautiful galleries, pinkish purple sunsets, and the sound of melodies wafting through the windows of cafes and coffee houses, the clicking sound of horses' hooves as they pull the carriages around the city with enamored tourists. Oh, and did I mention the beautiful architecture, the steady working lighthouse, the alligator farm, the galleries, and the lollygaggers? We certainly have those. There had always been a draw between Cedar Key and St. Augustine. In fact, many of the musicians that played at my restaurant came from St. Augustine. St. Augustine was my husband's and my getaway, and where it became my painting and creative time. I designed menus, t-shirts, painted other items for the gallery within my restaurant while there. I didn't understand the draw between the two cities until I later learned while St. Augustine was the first city to be established in America, Cedar Key was the second. Seems like maybe they were drawn by being sister cities. It was no accident that my husband and I soon bought a one-story second home in St. Augustine as our vacay home. It was soon also to become my happy place for painting as he and I traveled between Cedar Key and St. Augustine almost weekly, and not knowing soon to be my safe haven where I crawled and sometimes cried, but mostly cried out to God. On a Good Friday in 2004, we were having lunch out on St. Augustine Beach. We were going to head back to Cedar Key the next morning for the weekend's business. It was warm outdoors, but a cold sweat was pouring from my face. I was finding it hard to breathe. My stomach was queasy. The headaches had been daily for almost 6 weeks now. But I was also at a beautiful East Coast beach, a little barbecue restaurant, and I thought, this too shall pass. We sat at a picnic table outside reading the local newspaper and ordered salads. I told my husband that I didn't feel well and that I felt very hot. He seemed disturbed, put his paper down, and said, "Let's go inside." The room began to swim. I told him, "It's not working." And he said, "Put your head down. You'll be all right." After a few seconds, I stood to my feet and asked our waitress, named Wheezy, "Where are the restrooms?" She pointed and I turned. And then the room began to turn black. And then I saw her fleshy body jump the counter. And I heard a crack, not knowing it was my head. And that was just the beginning. Stay tuned for the rest of the story. Au revoir.